I'm here if you want some.
The influence of monsters and psychological contamination in From, an analysis of Fatima and Victor. In the series From, the characters are trapped in a world where survival is a constant struggle against monstrous entities and a progressively decaying environment. Among them, Fatima and Victor stand out as key figures whose eating habits and interactions with the creatures offer a reflection on how From's world deeply affects the human mind. This essay explores the connection between these characters and the monsters, focusing on their physical and psychological deterioration, symbolized by their diet, as well as the implications of these transformations in the dynamics of the series.
Food as a metaphor for contamination.
The first key point is the character's diet. Fatima, who is pregnant, begins eating rotten food, an abnormal behavior that transcends mere survival. In From's universe, this consumption of spoiled food becomes a metaphor for the contamination affecting both her body and mind. Isolation and loss of normalcy have driven Fatima to accept what is available, even if it symbolizes internal degradation. Her pregnancy, a potentially hopeful event, paradoxically becomes a source of danger. It is suggested that the child she carries could be connected to the monsters, implying her pregnancy may not be entirely human, but rather the result of an external entity's intrusion. Rotten food and her pregnancy represent infestation and the corruption of her being, both physically and mentally. This contamination affects not only her body, but also her perception of the world, turning motherhood into a frightening experience. Victor's encounters with the monsters, particularly the polite threat he receives, shed light on the psychological control these entities exert over the characters. The politeness of the creature may seem paradoxical, but it underscores a more perverse method of manipulation. If the monsters address the characters politely, it creates a cognitive dissonance that destabilizes the victim. This psychological manipulation is further marked by the fact that these entities do not merely seek to kill or destroy. They aim to break the survivor's spirit, keeping them in a state of confusion, hope, and eventual despair. By threatening to imprison Victor, the monsters impose a condition of existence in the town. Survival happens on their terms, and every hope of escape is an illusion they cultivate to tighten their control. This psychological game is rooted in a mechanism of control, hope. By giving the characters the illusion of salvation, the monsters create expectations that lead to profound despair. Fatima, seemingly contaminated by the town, could be an example of this subtle manipulation, where her pregnancy and subsequent events represent not only a connection to the creatures, but also a mental trap. The hope that she carries a normal child may well turn into a nightmare, marking a total loss of control over her fate. Degradation as a response to the monster's influence. Both characters, Fatima and Victor, illustrate how physical and psychological degradation is a response to the monster's influence. In From, the environment and creatures are not merely physical threats, they infiltrate the minds of the characters, contaminating their thoughts and actions. Fatima, through her eating habits and pregnancy, and Victor, through his traumatic memories and interactions with the monsters, embody this degradation. The town, with its mysteries and traps, forces each individual to abandon rationality and accept decline. Rotten food and the monsters' actions become metaphors for this total loss of control, but also instruments of human helplessness against uncontrollable forces. Victor's strength has already been tested many times, and each time he has emerged even more resilient. Here are some examples that illustrate these trials. Victor seems to have transcended fear or immediate suffering to focus solely on what is necessary for his survival. In a way, he has adapted to Fromville almost perfectly. This level of mental and emotional strength could be the reason he remains standing while others succumb, not only to physical dangers, but also to the psychological weight of the place. However, it is interesting to note that this strength can also make it difficult for others to truly understand Victor. His strength creates a distance between him and the other residents, and this solitude may be a price he has accepted to pay in order to survive. Victor's strength has already been tested many times, and each time he has emerged even more resilient. Here are some examples that illustrate these trials. Victor survived the collapse of everything he knew in Fromville, including the tragic death of his loved ones. Witnessing his mother, Miranda, and probably other close ones disappear or die under terrible circumstances could have broken anyone else. Yet, he found a way to keep going, despite the loneliness and trauma. For years, Victor lived alone, without emotional or physical support from others. This situation, which could have led many to madness or despair, reinforced his independence. It's a trial that shows just how exceptional his psychological strength is. 3. The monsters and constant threats. Victor has survived night after night in Fromville, avoiding the monsters through his vigilance and knowledge. This constant survival is in itself a daily test of his mental and physical strength. 4. His role as keeper of secrets. Victor shoulders a large part of Fromville's mysteries. He knows things others don't, but he often chooses to stay silent, perhaps to protect others or to avoid reopening his own wounds. This burden is a subtle yet heavy trial that pushes him to balance his own survival with what he's willing to reveal or share. 5. His connection to Ethan and Tabitha.
Victor's most recent trial may be his budding connection with Ethan and Tabitha. This bond seems to push him to open up more than he has in years. It could represent a tension between his survival instinct, keeping his distance to avoid suffering again, and his human need for connection.
Victor has already been through hell and has come out stronger, which speaks to his unshakable strength. But do you think there's a limit to what he can endure? Or has he truly become immune to trials after everything he has experienced? Victor survived the collapse of everything he knew in Fromville, including the tragic death of his loved ones. Witnessing his mother, Miranda, and probably other close ones disappear or die under terrible circumstances could have broken anyone else. Yet, he found a way to keep going, despite the loneliness and trauma.
Conclusion: the impossibility of escaping the monster's influence.
In conclusion, through Fatima and Victor, From demonstrates how the town and its monsters are not merely physical threats, but forces that contaminate the soul and mind of the characters. Rotten food, symbolizing internal corruption, and the monster's subtle manipulation illustrate a world where hope is only a mirage and survival becomes a slow descent into degradation. The impossibility of escaping this influence suggests that the character's true struggle is not only against physical monsters, but also against their own loss of humanity. The future of characters like Fatima and Victor seems increasingly uncertain and grim, making any form of redemption appear less and less likely.
Leave your thoughts in the comments.